My poetry is ideally all about making people laugh and cry at the same time. That's how I myself sometimes react when I revisit my poems, which for the longest time was hardly ever. One reason I avoided looking at my poems was that when I did, I couldn't help feeling how selfish I was to keep my work mostly under wraps. That's because I knew how badly people wanted and even needed to be moved by art of all kinds, so that if I kept being moved by my own poetry, then maybe a lot of other people would also be moved by it, but only if I shared it with them. I'm going to read 2 poems in this video. The first was written in November 2000. It was based on an experience I had aboard a New York City subway train. I may have written the poem down in its final form as soon as I got home. The poem is called Inocencia, innocence in Spanish. 3 little monkeys jumping on the bed. One fell down and broke his head. The doctor came, the doctor said, "No more jumping on the bed." The little boy reciting this on the train had what I took to be a Slavic accent, but then he broke into accent-free Spanish, telling this woman I took to be his mother how happy he was to be alive, and I believed him. Had I written Inocencia recently, I would probably have been more specific about the accent I referred to as Slavic. I think I would have called it Russian. That's because the most important child in my life is Leah Victoria Villalobos, whose mother is from Russia. Here's a picture of me with Leah. It was taken on an unseasonably warm early January day at the New York Botanical Gardens' most recent holiday train show, an annual event. The garden is not too far from my Bronx apartment, but is closer to where Leah lives with her parents. You may have already met Leah, her parents, and one of her paternal uncles in one of my previous videos, Gilgo Beach. My second poem is a bit longer. I wrote it in late June 2001 and revised it slightly in 2007 and again in 2019. This poem makes it sound like I was 35 when I wrote it, but I was already 56. So, either I had an encounter like the one in the poem when I was in my mid-30s, but didn't write about it for another 2 decades, or it happened when I was in my mid-50s, but I fudged my age, or I invented the encounter and made myself 35 because that was the sum of the ages of the other 2 characters in the poem. Who knows? The poem is called In the Playground. A father and his daughter, she resembles him a lot, so that's what I assume they are. He may be 30, she may be 5, I 35 for sure. Childless myself, sitting alone, on a beat-up bench in a run-down playground, observing the two of them, a father and his daughter. On this chilly afternoon, the two of them and I are the only ones in the playground. Sitting there observing them, I suddenly get the feeling that as much as she resembles him, she resembles her mother more. Where is her mother, I wonder, as I watch them go to the swings? A few of them are broken, but he finds one that isn't, and puts her on it, and stands behind her, and pushes with his thin right arm. And neither one is laughing, and neither one is smiling, and neither one is talking as he pushes her not very high. After a couple of minutes, he brings the swing to a halt, lifts her out of the seat, carries her over to a seesaw, puts her down at one end, goes to the other end, and with his thin right arm seesaws her up and down. And neither one is laughing, and neither one is smiling, and neither one is talking as he pushes her halfway up and lets her all the way down. Watching this business with the seesaw, I suddenly feel sorrier for them than for myself. For isn't it better not to have kids than to be weakly connected to them? I feel like leaving the playground. It's getting me quite depressed, but somehow I can't get up. It's like I'm glued to the bench. And so I'm still in the playground, sitting on the same bench, when he lifts her off the seesaw and puts her down on the ground and tells her it's time for them to leave, and takes her by the hand and leads her toward the exit, holding her by the hand. But before they can get to the exit, they have to pass my bench, and this is what happens when they do. The father gives me a dirty look, and the daughter gives me a smile.